You remember the feeling, the early days of learning English when everything was moving, when every week brought new words, new structures, new moments of understanding that felt like small victories, when you could measure your progress almost daily, a conversation that would have defeated you a month ago suddenly making sense, a sentence forming in your mouth that 6 weeks earlier you could not have constructed. That feeling of movement, of becoming, of the gap between where you were and where you wanted to be visibly, measurably closing. And then at some point, it stopped. Not dramatically, not overnight, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, the progress that had felt so reliable began to slow, then slow further, until one day you realized, with a frustration that had been building quietly for months, that you were not meaningfully better than you were a year ago, that you had reached a level and somehow got stuck there, that the English you had been so faithfully studying and practicing was no longer growing the way it once did. You kept going. You kept showing up. You kept doing the things you had always done, and the needle stopped moving. This is one of the most common and most demoralizing experiences in language learning. It has a name. Linguists and language teachers call it the plateau. And for millions of English learners around the world, it is the place where the journey ends, not because they gave up dramatically, but because the progress stopped feeling real and the effort stopped feeling worth it, and one day they simply stopped showing up. Today we are going to talk about the plateau, what it actually is, why it happens, and most importantly, what you can do to break through it and start moving again. Because the plateau is not permanent, it is not a ceiling, it is not evidence that you have reached your limit or that further progress is unavailable to you. It is a signal, a very specific signal about what is happening in your learning. And once you understand what it is telling you, you have everything you need to move past it. Let us start with the most important thing to understand about why progress stops. It stops because your brain has become too comfortable. This sounds counterintuitive. Comfort is supposed to be good. Comfort is supposed to be the reward for all the early hard work. And in some dimensions of life, comfort is indeed what you are working toward. But in language learning, and in any skill acquisition, comfort is the enemy of growth. Because growth happens at the edge of your current capability, in the space between what you can do easily and what you cannot yet do at all. In the uncomfortable zone, where your brain is being genuinely challenged, where it is having to work, where it is being asked to process and produce things that are not yet automatic. The moment a level of English becomes comfortable, the moment you can navigate your usual conversations, understand your usual content, express your usual ideas without significant effort, the brain stops investing in further development. Why would it? From the brain's perspective, the job is done. The level of English required to function in your current English environment has been achieved. The investment of energy in further growth is no longer justified by the demands being placed on the system. This is not laziness, it is efficiency. The brain is extraordinarily good at doing exactly what is required of it and not significantly more. And if what is required of it is the same level of English it has been using for the past year, it will maintain that level and not develop beyond it. The plateau, in this sense, is not a failure of effort, it is a failure of challenge. You have stopped being genuinely challenged by your English environment. And without genuine challenge, there is no genuine growth. So the first question to ask yourself when your English stops improving is this: when did I last do something in English that genuinely challenged me? Not something slightly uncomfortable, not something I had to think about a little harder than usual, something that was actually at the edge of my current capability, that stretched me, that required real effort, that I was not sure I could do. For many people who are stuck on the plateau, the honest answer is a long time ago. Maybe never, because there is a deeply human tendency in language learning, as in every area of life, to gravitate toward what we are already good at, to read the level of content we can already mostly understand, to have the kinds of conversations we have already had before, to use the vocabulary we already know, to avoid the structures that still feel uncertain, to stay, in other words, in the comfortable zone of existing competence rather than venturing into the uncomfortable zone of developing competence. And every time we make that choice, every time we choose the familiar over the challenging, the comfortable over the stretching, we are choosing the plateau over progress. The second reason English stops improving is one that nobody talks about enough. It is the problem of passive exposure without active production. Many English learners, particularly at the intermediate level, spend the vast majority of their English time consuming, watching series, listening to podcasts, reading articles, absorbing English in large quantities, passively, without being required to produce anything in return. This is not without value. Comprehensible input, exposure to English you can mostly understand, is genuinely important for language development. It builds vocabulary, it trains the ear, it develops intuition for how the language sounds and flows. The research on this is solid, but here is what passive exposure alone cannot do. It cannot build the neural pathways required for production. It cannot train your mouth and your mind to work together under the real-time pressure of a live conversation. It cannot develop the automatic retrieval of vocabulary and grammar that fluent speaking requires. It cannot give you the experience of searching for a word under pressure and finding it, or not finding it and having to work around it, which is the experience that actually builds communicative competence. Reading about swimming does not make you a swimmer. Watching swimming does not make you a swimmer. Getting in the water and swimming, imperfectly, with effort, making mistakes and correcting them, makes you a swimmer. If your English has plateaued and your learning consists primarily of passive consumption, the answer is both simple and terrifying. You need to speak more, write more, produce more. Be required to generate English, not just receive it, on a regular and consistent basis. This means conversations with real people, not just listening to other people's conversations. It means writing that is actually read and responded to, not just grammar exercises in a workbook. It means putting yourself in situations where English has to come out of you, where the pressure of communication demands production, rather than situations where English simply flows past you while you absorb it comfortably. The third reason English stops improving is the vocabulary trap. The vocabulary trap works like this. At the beginner level, every new word you learn is a genuine addition to your communicative capability. You could not say this thing before, now you can. The addition is real and the progress is measurable. But at the intermediate level, most of the words you encounter are words you already kind of know. You recognize them. You understand them in context. You could probably guess their meaning reasonably accurately, and so you add them to your passive vocabulary, the vast collection of words you understand when you encounter them, and assume that this passive recognition is the same as knowing the word. It is not. There is an enormous difference between passive vocabulary, words you recognize, and active vocabulary, words you can produce spontaneously in speech or writing under real-time pressure. Most intermediate learners have a passive vocabulary that is 3 to 5 times larger than their active vocabulary. They understand far more English than they can produce. And the gap between understanding and producing is exactly where the plateau lives. The words in your passive vocabulary are not helping your fluency. They are sitting in storage, available for recognition, but not for production. And no matter how many more words you add to that passive store, no matter how many vocabulary lists you study, how many new words you look up, how many flashcards you review, your spoken English will not improve until more of those words move from passive recognition to active production. How do you move words from passive to active? The same way you move any skill from theoretical knowledge to practical capability. You use them, repeatedly, under real conditions, in actual sentences, in actual conversations, in actual writing that goes somewhere and means something. Not once, not twice, but enough times that the retrieval becomes automatic. That the word arrives when you need it without conscious effort, without a pause, without the frustrating half-second delay between the thought and the expression that characterizes the intermediate plateau. The fourth reason, and this one is perhaps the most psychologically significant, is fear of mistakes. At the beginner level, mistakes are expected. Everyone makes them. Everyone knows they make them. And the social permission to be imperfect is built into the role of being a beginner. Nobody expects a beginner to speak perfectly. The beginner's mistakes are charming, understandable, a natural part of the process. But at the intermediate level, something shifts. You know enough English to be embarrassed by your mistakes. You are no longer a beginner who can be forgiven for not knowing. You are someone who has been studying for years and should be better than this. And so the stakes of every mistake feel higher. The embarrassment of making a grammatical error, of using the wrong word, of being misunderstood, that embarrassment has more weight than it did at the beginning. And so you begin to self-censor, to stick to the structures you know are correct, to use the vocabulary you are confident about, to avoid the sentences that might not come out right, to play it safe, linguistically, in ways that feel less embarrassing, but that also guarantee that your English stays exactly where it is. Because the only way to push your English beyond its current level is to use English that is beyond your current level, to attempt the complex sentence you are not sure about, to use the word you have only seen written and never spoken aloud, to venture into grammatical territory that feels uncertain and find out, through the attempt, whether you are right or wrong. Mistakes are not obstacles to progress. They are the mechanism of progress. Every mistake you make and notice and correct is a learning event, a moment when your brain updates its model of the language. Every mistake you avoid by playing safe is a learning event that never happened. The intermediate plateau is in large part a safety plateau, a level at which you have become skilled enough to avoid the mistakes that would push you past it. Let yourself make mistakes. Actively seek the conversations and the writing tasks where your current level is not sufficient, where you will be stretched past what you know, where you will get things wrong. Because getting things wrong in a stretched situation is the most efficient learning that exists. The fifth reason English stops improving is one that operates below the level of conscious awareness. It is the problem of your English environment not requiring more from you. Think about the English you actually use day to day, the conversations you have, the content you consume, the writing you produce. Be honest about the level of that English, not the level you are capable of in your best moments, but the level of your average, ordinary, Tuesday afternoon English interaction. For most intermediate learners, that average English interaction is well within their existing comfort zone. The conversations are similar to conversations they have had before. The content is at a level they can follow without significant effort. The writing they produce uses structures and vocabulary they have been using for years. Nothing in this environment is asking them to be better. Nothing is creating the pressure that produces growth. The environment is perfectly calibrated to maintain the current level, and that is exactly what it is doing. To break the plateau, you need to engineer an environment that requires more from you. That means deliberately choosing English content that is slightly above your comfortable level, where you understand most but not all, where there are words and structures that challenge you. It means seeking out conversations with people whose English is better than yours, where you are the one stretching to keep up rather than the one waiting for the other person to catch up. It means writing in contexts where the standard is higher than you currently meet and receiving feedback that shows you the gap. Engineering a demanding environment is not comfortable. It is, almost by definition, the opposite of comfortable. It means regularly operating in a space where you are not the most capable person in the room, where your limitations are visible, where the gap between where you are and where you want to be is obvious rather than hidden. But that discomfort is not a problem. That discomfort is the sensation of growth happening. It is the feeling of your brain being required to develop because the environment is demanding something it cannot yet produce automatically. Seek that feeling. Do not avoid it. Now let us bring this all together with something practical, something specific you can do today, not someday, not when the conditions are better, but today to begin breaking through the plateau. It is a single commitment, simple to describe and genuinely difficult to maintain. But if you make it and keep it for 30 days, your English will be in a different place at the end of those 30 days than it is right now. The commitment is this. Every day for 30 days, do one thing in English that is beyond your current comfort zone. Not 10 things, one. But it must be genuine. It must actually stretch you. It must be something where the outcome is uncertain, where there is a real possibility that you will struggle or make mistakes or not quite achieve what you were aiming for. Have a conversation with a native speaker about a topic you have never discussed in English before. Write something, a paragraph, a short essay, a message that uses vocabulary and grammar you are not yet confident with. Watch content at a faster pace or with a more complex vocabulary than you usually choose. Record yourself speaking English for 2 minutes on a topic you have not prepared. Listen back and notice where the gaps are. One thing, every day, genuinely challenging for 30 days. At the end of those 30 days, you will not be fluent if you were not before. You will not have eliminated the plateau completely, but you will have done something more important than that. You will have broken the pattern. You will have demonstrated to yourself, through 30 consecutive days of evidence, that you are someone who seeks the challenge rather than avoiding it. Someone who chooses growth over comfort. Someone who does not stay on the plateau because the plateau is familiar. And that identity, the identity of someone who actively pursues the edge of their capability, is the identity from which all further progress becomes possible. Your English did not stop improving because you reached your limit. It stopped improving because you stopped being challenged. The challenge is available. It is waiting for you on the other side of the comfortable.